Distinguished representatives, I kindly ask you to regain your seats so we can start this plenary. Welcome to this plenary on agenda item 12, review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. Ambassador Paul van den Ijssel, Ambassador Michael Kanu, distinguished representatives of Deputy Prosecutor and distinguished representatives of the ICC, state representatives, good afternoon to your excellencies, distinguished delegates, court focal points, staff union council, representatives of civil society, the ICCBA, and all relevant stakeholders who have been participated in this exercise and are present today here. I declare open the 5th plenary meeting of the 20th session of the Assembly of State Parties, which is dedicated to agenda item 12, on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. It is really my pleasure to be present at this meeting, which will consider this subject which is of great importance for the Court, indeed a top priority of the Assembly and stakeholders, and it has also becoming increasingly evident over the past year. I will be present throughout this meeting, and I very much look forward to hearing your views on the review. I will now leave this plenary meeting in the competent hands of the chairpersons of the review mechanism, Ambassador van den Ijssel and Ambassador Kanu. I hand over to you, ambassadors, and I wish the review mechanism, states parties, the court, and all of you very productive discussions. I can even give you the hammer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam President. You made my day. Thank you very much, and also for being in our midst in this plenary on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. As you have just done, but also at many occasions, you have underlined the importance of this exercise for the court, and for state parties and all stakeholders. And given your long-standing and special link with the court in many aspects now, we know that you take this issue very much at heart. For the order of business of this afternoon, we will first invite one of the court's focal points to make some remarks. After we, Michael and I, it's again a two-man show like last Monday, the co-chairs of the review mechanism have delivered our remarks. As we have indicated in the concept note, which you have seen last Sunday, we would like this meeting, to the extent possible, to be an interactive discussion. It is intended to provide a platform for a broader exchange of views on the review process and on policy issues, and to give the opportunity to all delegations, including to those that have not always been able to participate more fully during the year, to contribute to these important discussions. We very much encourage you to take advantage of the presence of the review mechanism, the court focal points, and the President herself to raise any questions or comments you may have on the review process. While there is a list of speakers, which of course we will follow, we encourage you to take the floor to make any points that you wish to raise after we have exhausted the list of speakers. We have received some statements via video link, which would also be played during the discussions. And since this meeting is live streamed, we wish to remind those participating remotely, as indicated in the concept note, that they have the opportunity to send questions or comments via the email to the address indicated in the note. And we intend to also answer and react to those questions and comments, so as to ensure that all participants can contribute in the discussion we will be having this afternoon. So far about the technology of this afternoon. Let's go to the substance. You would recall that at the first plenary meeting, we introduced the report of the review mechanism on the review process, which had been submitted pursuant to the resolution ASP20 Res 7 of last year. The review mechanism submitted the categorization of recommendations on the 30th of April and the comprehensive action plan on the 30th of June, in accordance with that resolution. And the categorization has formed the basis of our work, and together with the comprehensive action plan, they serve as a roadmap for the assessment of all the recommendations throughout the review process. The review mechanism allocated recommendations to different facilitations as a platform for discussion. And we welcome the work of the facilitators on the IAR recommendations and are grateful that they considered the recommendations that had been assigned to them in the CAP as a platform for discussion. As I think you're all aware, the mechanism has also allocated some recommendations to itself, as was indicated in the resolution. And we have held a series of meetings which I think were productive to discuss the assessment of those recommendations. We also note that some recommendations that the mechanism in the Comprehensive Action Plan identified for assessment in 2022 have already been assessed by some facilitations and also sometimes by the court. And we welcome this progress, while some that were mentioned for assessment in the second half of 2021, that is the other side of the coin, have had to be deferred to 2022. As we have mentioned many times before, this is not a completely automized process, and we recognize that we have to be flexible to allow for developments or circumstances out of the control of the main actors. I do, however, urge all stakeholders to do what is possible to stick to the ambitious timetable of the Comprehensive Action Plan. And the positive news here is that in the first half year of 2022, there is certainly less pre-ASP stress, as I would call it, so that leaves more time for good discussion on the assessment of the recommendations. As to the work of the review mechanism itself as a platform, we will issue a work program at the beginning of next year, and key issues will be, amongst others, the unified governance recommendations, the issue of tenure, and relations with civil society. But I say amongst others, there are others as well. Dear delegates, the review is not a box-ticking exercise, but at the end of the day, we have a common goal, which is to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system and make it more efficient and effective. That means that the discussions on the recommendations should result in concrete changes on the ground. Therefore, we intend to organize in 2022 also discussions or roundtables, we still have to think about the exact format, on the implementation of recommendations that were positively assessed previously. For example, but I stress example, there may be others, on the issue of working culture. We all agreed with the recommendations, but what are we actually doing? And there may be other similar discussions as well. The Comprehensive Action Plan sets out the timelines for assessment of the IR recommendations. The second half of 2021, we had a bulk of recommendations. That year is almost past. Many in 2022 and some remaining recommendations in 2023. And once again, I stress, it also indicates the entities that are responsible for the assessment and for the implementation. The work of the mechanism on this comprehensive document was complex and benefited greatly from the input of states parties, ASP mandate holders, the ASP presidency, the court focal points, individual office of the court, staff union council, civil society, and the Bar Association. And as part of our work, as we said on Monday, but I'll repeat it here, we routinely consulted these entities at each stage of this work, and we will continue to do so. At this stage, I would like to ask Michael to take over. Michael, please.
Thank you, Ambassador van der Rijssel. Thank you, Paul. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, you may recall that we circulated a matrix last Friday. The idea of the matrix is to give an overview of where we are in the review process, both on assessment and on implementation. We indicated in our message that if there were any errors, we would resolve them with the facilitators concerned. The matrix is included as Annex 2 of the report of the review mechanism submitted pursuant to ICC ASP 19-7, paragraph 9. And it has been issued as document ICC ASP 20/36. We thank the facilitators and the facilitations for providing updated information on the issues we missed in our first version. We remain open to discussing with any facilitator the need for updates or corrections to the information on their facilitations. As we indicated in our message by which we circulated the matrix last Friday, the matrix is purely factual overview of the state of the review as an informative tool to state parties and other stakeholders. It should be read in conjunction with the Comprehensive Action Plan. It covers those recommendations that are due to be assessed in 2021 according to the Comprehensive Action Plan. Where some recommendations indicated in the Comprehensive Action Plan for assessment in 2022, but were already assessed in this year, the outcome of those assessments have also been reflected. We noted in our report that the matrix contains information from the reports on the different facilitations, as we mentioned on Monday. We thank and commend the ASP mandate holders for their work in having many of the recommendations assigned to them assessed. We would like to once more stress that the timeline on implementation are meant to be indicative and can be further discussed in the appropriate facilitations. We would like to highlight that the matrix is a living document which we intend to update regularly in order to provide a regular overview of the state of the review. We intend to update the matrix at least twice a year. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, we are pleased to inform you that the standalone resolution of the review mechanism is agreed. And preambular paragraph 8 has passed through the silence procedure and is now agreed ad ref. We once again thank state parties for the constructive engagement and the flexibility shown throughout the informal consultations. The resolution will be introduced tomorrow, as will the other Assembly resolutions. Finally, and on even very positive note, there is a related resolution on the outcome of the work of the study group on governance on the recommendations of the independent expert, that is recommendations 381 to 384, and recommendations 76 to 78. This is demonstrative of the commitment of state parties and all stakeholders to assess and implement recommendations to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system. In the report of the Bureau on the study group governance, issued as document ICC ASP 20/21, the work done on independent experts' recommendations, the agreed recommendation text to the Assembly was adopted. And the Assembly in the first plenary session already took note of the work of the Bureau, including this language that went through a silence procedure of the study group and later of the Bureau. We commend the study group on governance for the work done in good time, the transparent and inclusive approach taken in addressing the recommendations, which the court noted were of high priority. This related resolution will also be introduced tomorrow and has been circulated via email. We shall now proceed to remarks to be made by the court. We would like to invite the court to make some remarks. We have had a very fruitful interaction with the court focal point throughout the year, and we thank them for their cooperation and assistance. I now give the floor to the Deputy Prosecutor, Mr. James Stewart, one of the court focal points, to speak on behalf of the court. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kanu. Madam President of the Assembly of States Parties, Your Excellencies, Ambassador van den Eyssel and Ambassador Kanu, Excellencies, colleagues and friends. As Deputy Prosecutor, I am pleased to make these few comments on behalf of my fellow court focal points, Hirad Abtahi, Chef de Cabinet to the President, and Osvaldo Zavala Hilaire, Senior Special Assistant to the Registrar. Together, we have worked and spoken as one court. As focal points for the court, working with our respective teams, we've engaged with the review mechanism in a cooperative, constructive, and productive way. We were fortunate to have enjoyed an excellent working relationship with the co-chairs of the review mechanism, the chairs of the ASP mandate holders, and other stakeholders in a common endeavor to strengthen the International Criminal Court. We've made very good progress this year in assessing recommendations of the independent group of experts and in many instances, implementing them. I would like to express our profound appreciation for the extraordinary work that Ambassadors van den Eyssel and Kanu have done, together with the ad country representatives of Bangladesh, Chile, and Poland throughout this endeavor. The report the court has filed describes the progress we've made in assessing recommendations and taking action. The review process is one we regard as vital to the evolution of the ICC within the Rome Statute system of international criminal justice and the reinforcement of its ability to deliver effectively on the mandate the framers of the Rome Statute gave it. The court's overall response to the report of the independent experts, which contains its preliminary analysis of the recommendations and information on relevant activities, remains topical, but much has happened since it was submitted. As court focal points, we contributed, along with the state's parties and other stakeholders, in an inclusive and consultative process to the work of the review mechanism, respecting the categorization and allocation of recommendations and the setting of timelines. We contributed in the same way to the comprehensive action plan created by the review mechanism and approved by the Bureau. In accordance with the timeline set out in the plan, we actively and productively engaged with the review mechanism and ASP mandate holders in a series of facilitations involving the court, states parties, and civil society stakeholders. These facilitations provided platforms for the assessment of recommendations and discussion on further action. We reported in detail through these platforms on progress achieved within the court on the assessment of recommendations, as well as further actions undertaken by the court. This reporting is now reflected in the reports of the review mechanism, the Bureau, and the Assembly mandate holders who've submitted their reports through the Bureau to the ASP. For the sake of efficiency and to avoid duplication, yet ensure completeness, we have referenced the relevant Bureau reports in our report on behalf of the court. The facilitations done this year have covered a spectrum of recommendations relating to matters such as, for the judiciary specifically, election of the presidency, induction and continuing professional development for the judges, full-time service of judges, the Code of Judicial Ethics, and judicial collegiality, efficiency of the judicial process and fair trial rights, transitions in the judiciary, the generation of jurisprudence, but also, more generally, the matter of 2 deputy prosecutors, the need for an OTP senior media officer, the court's working culture, governance issues, including for the registry and the OTP, for example, election of the registrar, OTP staff training, OTP internal quality control mechanisms such as source evaluation, peer evidence reviews, trial readiness, trial monitoring, and other topics, as well as lessons learned. Complementarity, cooperation, GBGR issues respecting staff recruitment, amendments to the rules of evidence and procedure, legal aid, the IOM, and budget management oversight. In each of these facilitations, the court, through its focal points, has reported in detail on the assessment of recommendations and actions already undertaken. We've done this while managing the impact of the continuing pandemic and undergoing a transition to a new presidency and a new prosecutor. For his part, the prosecutor has been addressing a multiplicity of issues, from budget through working culture to the restructuring of the OTP. And we've had to preserve time and space for him to come to conclusions that may have an effect upon the assessment and implementation of certain recommendations. The prosecutor has also been working to gain a deep understanding of the situations and cases the court has on its plate, with a view to setting priorities and using resources to the best advantage. Similarly, we've had to preserve time and space for the presidency and judiciary, who are also examining new approaches to the processes that are part of their work, including a request by the President to the IOM to do an evaluation of working culture in the judiciary. With all these challenges, we have nevertheless made genuine progress. The assessment of recommendations will continue in the coming year. The Court will keep states, parties, and civil society stakeholders informed through the facilitations on actions it has undertaken to implement recommendations. The process has, to this point, focused primarily upon the Court and its activities, but we hope it will embrace a wider perspective and examine as well how states, parties, and civil society propose to do their part in strengthening the Rome Statute system of international criminal justice as a whole. No one should fear a loss of momentum. For its part, the Court is committed unequivocally to the success of the review process. Success is vital to the ability of the Court to accomplish its mandate, but it's also vital to the ability of states parties to realize the promise of the Rome Statute, which they created with the goal of protecting innocent children, women and men, from unimaginable atrocities that deeply shock the conscience of humanity. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prosecutor, also for your kind words addressed to the mechanism. And I think on our turn, we know that we very much appreciated the cooperation with the focal points. Dear delegates, I would like now to turn to the speakers list. I have a speakers list of about 13. We will start with 2 group statements. We also have statements by civil society and some video statements, as I said before. I have a few requests. First of all, I think the idea is maybe in other plenaries as well that speakers speak from their place in the hall, so they don't have to come to the podium. I strongly urge you to stick to the time limit. We have, as I said, a long list, and I hope there will be some additional questions or comments coming from here or over the video. So please stick to the 3 minutes. And I think on that note, I will start, and the first on the list is the Ambassador of Finland, Päivi Kaukaranta, who will speak on behalf of the Northern Group. Ambassador Kaukaranta, I can't see where you are, but you have the floor. There, now I see you, sorry.
Madam President of the Assembly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the floor. As you said, today I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Nordic countries, namely Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Finland. We warmly welcome the opportunity to participate in this dialogue and reiterate our support for the review process. We consider it crucial for the future of the Court. The Nordic countries thank the review mechanism and the Assembly mandate holders for the immense amount of work this past year. We also welcome and commend the Court's efforts and engagement in the process. We continue to emphasize inclusivity and transparency as key elements for the legitimacy of the review process. This is a joint endeavor between the Court, the Assembly, and other stakeholders, including the civil society. We all share the goals of strengthening the performance of the Court and effective delivery of justice. The review process must be carried out in full respect of existing mandates of the Court and the Assembly, including continuously observing and safeguarding the Court's judicial and prosecutorial independence, as well as the Assembly's management oversight responsibility regarding the administration of the Court. Several topics of key importance to the Nordics were discussed in recent months, such as recommendations on the Court's working culture and human resources, zero tolerance of bullying, harassment and sexual harassment, internal grievance procedures, gender equality, and the trust fund of victims. We are pleased to see that many assessments were concluded and underline the timely implementation of positively assessed recommendations. As to the more complex issues, we hope that all stakeholders remain committed to keeping up the pace. We welcome the matrix as a useful tool for tracking progress and look forward to its updates. As we resume in 2022 some of the Nordic priorities include recommendations concerning unified governance as they inform and underpin many of the other recommendations. Gender equality, including gender mainstreaming and targeted actions. Working culture, internal grievance procedures and ethics. Budget management oversight issues. Addressing liquidity issues, outstanding contributions and arrears. Human resource issues. Establishment of the tenure system and provision of assistance and reparations to victims. We also continue to place importance on recommendations related to the OTP and the Court on the efficiency of activities. We believe that active participation by the Court staff in the assessment and implementation is key to sustainable results. The Comprehensive Action Plan sets out an ambitious timeline. The Nordics, as small delegations, feel the weight of this exercise, but we are convinced of the need to move ahead with ambition and determination. We concurred with the goal of completing most assessments by the end of 2022. We encourage the review mechanism to exercise as much leadership as possible, and we would also recommend starting discussions early in 2022 to allow sufficient time for the meaningful engagement of all stakeholders. We would like to see the implementation of positively assessed recommendations pick up speed and look forward to receiving updates on results. Mr. Chair, I'm getting close to the end of my intervention. I would just say that a more complete version of the Nordic countries' remarks has been submitted as a written statement on the review process. And I would conclude by saying that posing a question to the review mechanism and other participants of this plenary session, what should the states parties do in the coming year to ensure the success of the process? I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Ambassador Coquerant, and your question is noted, and we may come back to it. Next is Côte d'Ivoire on behalf of the African Group. Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President,
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African states parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The African states parties to the Rome Statute welcome this plenary session on the review mechanism as a platform for exchange of views on the review process and take this opportunity to commend the review mechanism for carrying out its mandate with transparency and inclusiveness. We thank the review mechanism for its important accomplishments thus far. The categorization of the independent expert recommendations, the report on the overall progress, and the comprehensive action plan. The African states parties also take note with satisfaction of the report of the review mechanism and the matrix which take into account and reflect the consultations made with the state parties, the court, and all stakeholders. The matrix presents a useful overview of the state of the review process and completes the comprehensive action plan. Therefore, we encourage the review mechanism to continue its ambitious approach and maintain the current pace of the review process. Madam President, the African states parties attach great importance to the work of the review mechanism of ICC and the Rome Statute system. In this connection, we reaffirm our commitment to the review process for the strengthening of the court and its effectiveness through inter alia, good governance, the principle of complementarity, cooperation, and promotion of equitable geographical representation and gender balance. Therefore, we support the review of the ICC and the Rome Statute system and the work of the review mechanism. And we remain engaged and fully committed in this important review process. In this regard, the African states parties reiterate the African Union heads of state and government decision on the ICC, urging for engagement in the review process and to address the issue of politicization of the court. To conclude, Madam President, the African states parties remain convinced in the hope that our collective efforts in the review of the ICC and the Rome Statute system, as well as the work of the review mechanism, will contribute to strengthening the court and the Rome Statute system in its effectiveness, legitimacy, and capacity to deliver effective justice and end impunity for atrocity crimes. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you very much.
I thank you. Je vous remercie, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur,
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
for your kind words addressed to the members of the review mechanism. Next on my list is the Ambassador of Australia, Ambassador Matthew Neuhaus. Ambassador Neuhaus, please, you have the floor.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, colleagues, it is almost 2 years to the day that this Assembly launched by consensus a state-driven process to review the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. It is important to take stock of what has been achieved, particularly through the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, but also to reflect on the way forward. We are indebted to the group of independent experts for their thorough review and comprehensive list of recommendations delivered in September 2020, and we pay tribute to the hard work of the review mechanism, and in particular the co-chairs, Ambassador Paul van den Eyssel and Ambassador Michael Kanu, this last year, as the mechanism has categorised and allocated recommendations for assessment and, where appropriate, implementation. To its credit, the Court has engaged fulsomely and constructively in dialogue with the states parties and with other relevant stakeholders on all recommendations, and we look forward to this continued partnership and thank the Deputy Prosecutor for his presentation today and indeed his long service to the Court. As we enter into a third year of this process, we must redouble our efforts and move from review to real reform. Madam President, the group of independent experts recommended that a, quote, discussion among stakeholders should be convened on the strategic vision of the Court for the next 10 years, which will enable the Court and the ASP to focus their efforts on implementing the Rome Statute in the same direction. The Court, in its response to this recommendation, suggested, quote, such an exercise could be planned for 2023, when the Rome Statute celebrates its 25th anniversary, and sufficiently in advance for its conclusions to become a basis for the 2025-2028 strategic planning cycle of the Court. In Australia's view, there is merit in this suggestion. Consolidating on reforms achieved must be a key objective of the review process in order to set the Court on a sustainable path for its long-term future. It would also be timely. It has now been over 10 years since the 2010 Kampala Review Conference. However, for a review conference or strategic discussion to be successful, it must be underpinned by significant progress made by the Court and ASP in assessing and implementing these reform options. There is a real opportunity in the coming year to achieve that progress with the new generation of leadership in place. And we would note that the President of the Court, in his remarks at the opening, indicated that the Court stands ready to work with the ASP on this recommendation. We remain open on the timing and format of a strategic discussion or review conference, particularly with the challenges presented by the pandemic. Australia stands ready to engage in dialogue next year on how we develop a shared vision for ensuring this investment, which we have all made, now pays dividends. Madam President, for Australia's part going forward, we will continue to focus our advocacy for reform on 4 key priorities. First, the Court must better align its resources and strategic direction with its core mandate as a court of last resort that is complementary to national jurisdictions. Second, we must work together to achieve more efficient prosecutorial and judicial processes and greater accountability to the Assembly of States Parties for the administration of justice. Third, the Court must strive for greater coherence and consistency in its jurisprudence. And fourth and finally, there must be a strengthening of the Court's internal culture and governance to safeguard and advance the Court's operational effectiveness and professionalism. In raising and in seeking to address these challenges, Australia continues its long-standing support of the Court and its role in pursuing accountability for the most serious crimes of international concern. That is our common endeavour. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Neuhaus, and again also for your kind words addressed to the co-chairs of the review mechanism. Next is United Kingdom, Colin McIntyre, the legal advisor. I can't see you, Colin, but I assume you're in the hall. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for giving me the floor. The UK remains a strong supporter of the review process. We continue to believe that reform is key to strengthening the court. The UK welcomed the independent expert report last year. This was an important moment for the Assembly and for the court. We further welcome the steps that have been undertaken this year to maintain forward momentum in that regard. We thank the review mechanism, the Assembly and the court for their work. The efforts to strengthen the court's performance are a matter of shared interest between the Assembly and the court. To achieve success will require close collaboration and continuing dialogue to tackle the problems identified in the report. Looking ahead, it is of crucial importance that the focus be on delivering practical changes, including through the implementation of key recommendations. Improving working culture and introducing policies on tenure are among the top priorities for the period ahead. The UK has recognised the case for further resources for the court this year. In doing so, we continue to stress the importance of ensuring that those resources are allocated effectively. Madam President, the review process remains a top priority for the UK. The most important work still lies ahead. Delivering real results and practical change will be critical to the future health of the court. Thank you.
I thank the UK representative for his statement and for his kind words, and also for being very short and crisp. Next is the Ambassador of Chile, Mr. Hernan Salinas. And before I give you the floor, let me also thank Chile and Poland and Bangladesh. I didn't do that explicitly, for their fantastic work they did as country focal points, helping Michael and me to stay on the right path. I hope you will continue to do that. Ambassador, please.
Dear Madam President, first of all, I should like to recognize and thank the commitment and leadership shown by the ambassadors Paul van den Eyssel and Michael Imran Kanu for everything they've been doing in the review mechanism, supported by Bangladesh, Poland and my country, Chile, as country focal points, which we were very pleased to do. We also wish to thank the valuable work performed by the Secretariat. With satisfaction, we're able to see that this first phase has been successfully completed, as is seen in the report submitted to the ASP. The aim, obviously, is to improve the efficiency and efficacy of the court and the Rome Statute system. Achieving these goals, including the including through the CAP and the drafting of the 374 recommendations formulated by the IER, has required enormous amounts of work, which was coordinated in an excellent way between the court, states parties, and civil society organizations. This has been done in an inclusive and transparent manner. We should like to echo what has been said by those who have commended the court on this indefatigable work to bring us closer to reaching those aims. This work has been moving forward in a structured, integrated, and holistic way, bearing in mind all of the recommendations, categorizing them, prioritizing them, and submitting them for consideration. And moreover, identifying those which are in part of the CAP is a matter of urgency. And yet, this process is not ending here. It turns out that this mechanism is going to have to continue with its categorization and prioritization of the work to be done, and then to ensure follow-up and assessment in conformity with the CAP. And so that is why we are able to say that based on the work thus far, we are happy to express our trust in the review mechanism and look forward to seeing to celebrating the approval of the resolution for this ASP. My country stands ready to continue contributing as a country focal point. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for your continued commitment. Next is the Ambassador of Mexico, José Antonio Zabalgocha Treo. I can't see you, but you have the floor. Ambassador, please.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I'm afraid that Ambassador Zabalgocha Trejo isn't here, but I'm happy to speak on his behalf. Members of the court, distinguished delegates, members of the CSOs. First of all, Mexico would like to thank Ambassadors Van Berengeisel and Michael Ramcano for all of the work that they have done, for their leadership and their broad-reaching work as part of the review mechanism of the ICC and the Rome Statute system. Thanks to their dedication and continued work, they have been able to steer the court and states parties in the right direction for the upcoming year and implementing the IER recommendations. Similarly, Mexico wants to thank the indefatigable work done by the focal points, the work groups of the Bureau and the facilitations, those who've had the mandates, and civil societies and everyone else involved in this process. Once again, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, we still come up against new challenges. We still see the need to battle impunity against the worst kinds of crimes affecting the international world. And we've already seen outstanding results in 2021, and Mexico was part of the problem that the categorization has already been achieved. The comprehensive action plan is now on its way, and we already know in early 2002 a work program is going to be issued. So despite the progress made this year, we know that 2022 is going to be a busy one. Mexico continues its support and its commitment to keep working in this transparent and inclusive process and working hand in hand with the three organs of the court and civil society organizations so as to support and boost the Rome Statute system and the operations of the court. We will continue to do our utmost to fulfill this mandate and adhere to the CAP built on the IER recommendations. This is the moment to strengthen the court, to ensure reparations for victims and affected communities. We're on the right path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam, for your statement and for your kind words addressed to us. Next, I would like to give the floor to Belgium, Ambassador William Roland de Stappers. Ambassador, vous avez la parole.
You have the floor, sir.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, representatives of the review mechanism, thank you for giving me the floor in French. That is always a very welcome pleasure. Belgium supports this review mechanism of the ICC and the Rome Statute system and is contributing actively. We feel that it is very useful and timely to be able to assess how the court's operations can be made more effective and efficacious. I am not here to talk about the content of the IAR's recommendations in particular. I wanted to focus my statement more on methodologies and the approach of this process. I think that it's up to all stakeholders, to start with the states parties and the organs of the court, to take part in this process with great lucidity. And in this regard, Belgium wanted, first of all, as we also heard from the Ambassador of Australia, welcome and commend all of the work that has been done by the court itself. They've shown great seriousness in their commitment to the process, and they've had a holistic approach across the whole of it, as we saw on the 14th of April last year, but also through the contributions and inputs of the experts' recommendations within the IOM and various different felicitations. We commend this work. We also feel that the excellent leadership and coordination role undertaken by the review mechanism has done an excellent job, especially as concerns implementing Resolution 7 of the last ASP. We feel that this work is all the more commendable given the number of recommendations. Setting priorities is an excellent choice, but it does mean that we risk taking some decisions too swiftly without enough preparation. And the upstream work for this session shows that some states parties had trouble following the process. So we would call on the Bureau and the Secretariat to ensure as broad an input as possible from states parties when it comes to implementation of any upcoming recommendations. Belgium also wants us to insist again on the need for the assessment process to avoid becoming a micromanagement of the court, which we think would be counterproductive and against our principles, and that could actually distract the organs of the court from their main task, which is the delivery of justice. The categorization of recommendations, as has been settled in May of this year, needs to be respected, so as to ensure judicial and prosecutorial independence, which is of vital importance. We need to make sure that there is no interference from member states thereupon. We are satisfied that this process is underway and that many of the experts' recommendations are currently being assessed or already implemented. And by way of conclusion, I just wanted to respond to the question that was raised by the Ambassador of Finland on behalf of the Nordic countries. If I understood the question correctly, the question was, what should states parties do to ensure success? And I think it's an important question. And it is true that the IER does actually give some hints in this regard. And yet it doesn't go into the details of that. But what springs to mind for me vis-à-vis this question is that what states parties can and should do would be, obviously, first of all, ensure that the court has the budget that enables it to operate correctly. And we know that we're very, very close to an agreement thereupon, which is obviously a very difficult exercise this year, given the obstacles to overcome. Cooperation of states, and we heard the importance of that this morning. Without states' cooperation, both at the judicial level and to the operational level, the court would be nothing and would come to nothing. Diplomatic cooperation and representation in the court. Obviously, this is another very important key. And one further aspect for what I think states parties can do is submit the best possible candidatures that they can for any posts to be filled. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Being really interactive, so I encourage other speakers to also, if they feel, to respond to the question posed by our Finnish colleague, as we just heard from our Belgian colleague. Next speaker is Switzerland, Ambassador Nederkorn. I can't see you, but I'm sure you're there. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam President, the review process of the ICC is of utmost importance. Switzerland fully supports this undertaking. The court over the recent years has faced unprecedented challenges. As such, the review mechanism is an opportunity for us to reaffirm our desire to see a strong, effective court that has all of the resources necessary in order to fulfill its noble mission to eradicate impunity. Switzerland believes that this process should be exhaustive, transparent, and respectful of the competencies and the independence of the court. We are pleased to see that the conversations that were begun this past year have led to favorable momentum. Here we would like to pay tribute to all of the work done by the mechanism so far and all the various felicitations, working groups, mandate holders, and bodies of the court. We are also grateful to civil society for its strong commitment, which has helped us make the progress we've made throughout the entire year. Now, what lies ahead? We must make sure that this process leads to substantial savings in effectiveness for the court in 2022. We states parties should remain committed to implementing the recommendations that have been addressed to the ASP. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ambassador Nederkorn for his statement. Next is another country focal point. And I give it great pleasure and great thanks also for her work. The floor to the representative of Poland, Pani Paulina Dudzik. Proszę bardzo, Pani.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And again, your Polish is improving, so congratulations. Thank you. Dziękuję. Madam President, Excellencies, dear colleagues, Poland, as a member of the review mechanism at country focal point, attaches great significance to the tangible outcome of the review process. Everyone in this room shares the common goal of the review exercise, which is strengthening the Rome Statute system. However, it should come as no surprise that sometimes we differ on how to achieve this common goal. These differences, though, should not stall the progress of the review process. We have already assessed many of the IER recommendations, proving that we are able to overcome differences, but there is a lot of work ahead of us and much more difficult decisions to make. In any case, at the heart of the review process is the implementation of recommendations. We already heard on many occasions that the review process is not a box-ticking exercise. Positive assessment and even an immediate implementation of some recommendations focusing, for instance, on the working culture do not mean that we have automatically addressed the issue at stake. The review process, especially within the priority recommendations, is an ongoing commitment that requires a continued engagement on the part of the states parties and the court. We truly hope that we will be able to continue our joint efforts in the spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding, and that every implemented recommendation will actually mean a positive change for the court, not only a box ticked on paper. To conclude, I would like to reaffirm Poland's commitment and readiness to continue our work as a member of the review mechanism. And on a more personal note, if I may, I would like to sincerely thank Ambassador van den Eyssel and Ambassador Kanu, our co-chairs of the review mechanism, for their extremely skillful leadership this year. Ambassadors, without your personal dedication and hard work, it would not have been possible to fulfill all the difficult tasks assigned to the review mechanism. I also thank my fellow at-country focal points, colleagues from Chile and Bangladesh, and of course the court focal points for excellent cooperation throughout the review process. And last but not least, I would like to also express my deep gratitude to the Secretariat for the invaluable support. Thank you so much. Dziękuję.
Dziękuję. Thank you very much for your statement and your kind words. They are duly noted. Maintenant, je voudrais donner la parole à
I should now like to give the floor to France, to Ambassador Vesey. I'm not sure if he's here, but I'll give the floor to you. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Madam President of the Assembly, representatives of the mechanism, representatives of the court. France is one of the first states to support the idea of there being external audit of the ICC in order to analyze its functioning and try to equip it to rise to the challenges that it faces outside and inside the court. We've always been involved in a constructive dialogue, trying to make positive suggestions, focusing on making international justice more effective as enshrined in the Paris Declaration, which is a non-binding instrument that has nonetheless been endorsed by many jurisdictions, which calls for more effective, swifter, and more transparent justice. In September 2020, the IAR report came out. It enabled us to take stock of where we stand and to start sifting through the recommendations in order to improve the Rome Statute. The ASP a year ago set up a review mechanism in order to achieve ambitious, swift progress in order to strengthen the independence of the court. We are very pleased with the progress that's been made during our consultations this year, making it possible for us to make progress on some key recommendations, for example, to speed up the amendment of the procedures for the presentation of evidence. We are always looking forward to engaging in a constructive dialogue with the other states parties for all of these recommendations. We also are pleased to see that they've all been working together to tackle certain problems pointed out by the external audit examiners, for example, the work culture, harassment, etc. We certainly hope that all of this will lead to real change. France believes that the time for implementing the flagship recommendations of the IAR has come. We are not laying the blame primarily on the bodies of the court, because they do have to make some slight changes, but we are talking about structural, far-reaching changes in order to improve the way in which the court does its work. The Assembly is the guarantor of the sound administration of this institution and must be involved in the decisions that are going to lead to the implementation of these priority recommendations and also exercise its oversight functions. This is what the court will be contending with over the next few years. It's a question of trust between the court and the states parties that created it and that support it. France will be playing its full share in this endeavor. We have identified some key recommendations alongside Germany and the UK. We submitted a joint statement on this on a follow-up mechanism last summer. Let me just foreshadow some of the things that we believe are very important and would like to call on all stakeholders to make sure that these recommendations can be implemented swiftly. First, when it comes to the overall governance of the court, the recommendations of the IR on single governance is critical for the entire process. Secondly, recommendations to improve work culture and the elimination of potential cases of intimidation and harassment are priorities. Third, when it comes to resource management, the introduction of greater flexibility and transparency in resource allocation are also top priorities. The registrar as stated in the report, has a leading role to play to make sure that all of the administrative functions and operations are consistent and predictable. Flexibility should be applied to the management of human resources as well, to make sure that there is a higher rotation of staff talent and by bringing in new talent as well. Fourthly, we call for strengthening of respect in different languages within the court. This is a priority issue for France. Multilingualism is essential for effective investigations and prosecutions, to foster a spirit of universality, and it's also important to respect the rights to defense of the accused and the rights of protection of the defendants. This is an endeavor to draw on the two main traditions, the continental law system and the common law system. And I'm sure that the framers decided to draw on the best practices in the respective systems, looking abroad to other jurisdictions, and in particular making sure that the court's jurisprudence is more understandable and more applicable in various jurisdictions. We can only call on all to work together to make sure that there's good cooperation between the COUT and civil society. As the ambassador of Australia has pointed out, the 20th anniversary of the coming into force of the Rome Statute will be a prime opportunity for us to mobilize our resources in moving forward to improve on everything that we've done so far this year, working with the focal points and the co-chairs of the mechanism. We're grateful to them for all their efforts. Thank you.
Merci, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for your kind words.
Maintenant, the next speaker will be the ambassador of Liechtenstein, Christian Bennewezer, and he will join us on video. I hope it works. Someone has to push. Oh, there he is.
Madam President, chairs of the review mechanism, as our foreign minister noted during the general debate yesterday, this session of the Assembly marks a moment both of opportunity and of challenge. In particular, the process initiated by the independent expert review can bring the court, state parties and civil society together in a new way that allows for constructive cooperation and results in stronger performance and overall impact of the court. Liechtenstein has helped initiate and been supportive of the independent expert review process since the beginning, which we believe should result in the court's enhanced performance. We look forward to the continuation of an exclusive process that safeguards the integrity of the Rome Statute and is carried out in close cooperation with the court and within the delineated mandates given to us as state parties and the court respectively. Indeed, we are happy to see that the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence has routinely been referenced in the operative paragraphs of the review resolution. The implementation of the recommendations from the independent expert review that fall within the exclusive competencies of the court can only be implemented by the court itself. We are aware that the independent expert review is not panacea, and we must continue working on our own tracks. This applies not only to state parties but also to the court. To increase efficiency of the review process, our discussions should be focused on those recommendations directed at the ASP, while allowing the court the time and space to implement the IER recommendations directed at it and report back to this Assembly. Moreover, we will only be successful in this review effort if we also look at ourselves as state parties and agree on ways to step up our own efforts and to improve our own performance. As state parties, we must be prepared to extend full political, diplomatic, and financial support to the court to stand up against political attacks against it, and in doing so, we must show full respect for the basic principles and integrity of the Rome Statute. In particular, judicial independence, impartiality of the judges and the prosecutor, and the principle of complementarity as provided for in Article 17 of the treaty. It is also our expectation that the independent expert review and the wider review process will lead to healthier budget discussions that consider the combination of the best possible use of the ICC's resources and a more constructive approach generally taken by states to the court's budget. Madam President, chairs of the review mechanism, the Rome Statute stood the test of time and is one of the biggest achievements in the area of treaty making in the past 3 decades. The upcoming anniversary of 20 years of operations of the court is an important occasion to showcase the necessity of the ICC as the key accountability institution in the international community. And the review process will only be successful if we create a sense of common purpose both among state parties and between state parties and the court. And there is room for significant improvement in this respect. We are ready to work towards this end and will continue to strongly support the mandate of the ICC. I thank you.
We thank you, Ambassador Wennewezer. I hope that somehow this message is conveyed to New York. Next, and I'm very pleased that they are here. That is, and just one sentence from my side. Michael and I have tried to fulfill the resolution with the most transparency and inclusiveness. Many of you have praised us for that. And I think if we discuss all these things, the Staff Union Council should be part of the discussion, as they have been in some of the discussions on the working culture. And I'm very happy to have them here. And with that having said, je voudrais donner la parole à Madame.
I would like to give the floor to Madame Denouy from the Staff Union. You have the floor, Madam. Madam President, Excellencies, honorable participants, the Staff Union welcomes the opportunity that has been afforded us to participate in the discussions on the review of the court. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Ambassador Van Ysel and Ambassador Kanu for their leadership in this process. From the very outset of the review, the Union has been mobilized in order to share the views of the court's staff. The IER report shows that the Union can and must play an important support role in the process of strengthening confidence within the court, as well as in changing its culture by fostering and implementing an approach based on cooperation and collaboration. After nearly 20 years of existence, the court is now at a turning point in its institutional life, changing work culture, putting an end to all forms of discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, or intimidation, and the like, and establishing mechanisms for conflict resolution are among the challenges that must be met. As a representative of the Staff Union, I can guarantee you that all my colleagues believe in the mandate of the court. I think the last 2 years, where we've contended with the pandemic, demonstrates this. Each and every one of us has done everything in our power to make sure that all of our work would be done on time and that the objectives of the court would be met. So when the court is called upon to implement important recommendations regarding the work environment and the work culture, it is important that it not overlook the views of its main actors, i.e. the employees, the staff. Now, a work culture is the set of beliefs and conducts and aspirations and how that has an impact on all of the employees in that organization. So it is of utmost importance for the court to offer members of the staff to make their voices heard and that the court take into consideration their viewpoints. The Staff Union also stresses the need for this change of culture to be a long-haul process. It should be based on a well-thought-out methodology that is adapted to the circumstances. Any delay would make this entire exercise superficial with no benefit, and in fact, it would probably be counterproductive for our organization. We would therefore call on you, states parties, as well as the review mechanism. We call on you to establish clear, tangible, measurable goals going forward. We would encourage the ASP as well as the court's senior officers to work together in order to ensure optimum effectiveness and a harmonized approach to introducing all of the processes that will be introduced. The idea of there being one single court should be the focal point of this entire shared undertaking. Now, turning to harassment and intimidation and the introduction of a zero tolerance policy, the staff union would like to underscore the importance of responsibility. Responsibility should be applicable to any staff member who is guilty of inappropriate behavior, regardless of the position that that person holds within the organization. It should also apply to managers who fail to take the appropriate measures to sanction those under their authority who've acted inappropriately. It is important for the court to have a centralized, formal and informal mechanism for settling disputes, one in which the staff would have their full confidence. A system that would also make it possible to defuse conflicts upstream, perhaps by having recourse to mediation tools or others. And on all of these issues, the trade union is willing to work as a willing partner with the court, with the ASP, and with the review mechanism. It is high time for our organization here at this crossroads in its institutional history should make the right turn so that it can actually implement the excellence and standards of excellence that it constantly calls for. Thank you.
Madame, je vous remercie pour votre contribution.
Thank you for that contribution.
I couldn't see you. I don't know where you spoke from, but I heard you loud and clear, and I'm sure all the delegates did. Ah, voilà. It's not just my eyesight, it's a big hole. Next is the representative of the Coalition for the ICC, and we will have two speakers from civil society. She will be followed by Human Rights Watch. Of course, the civil society is an important player in the review process, so we're happy to have them here. And I'm happy to give the floor to Mrs. Dorine Lanta of the Coalition for the ICC. You have the floor, madam.
Oh. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Excellencies, in an effort to coordinate civil society around the complex and overwhelming review process, the Coalition for the ICC set up a dedicated review team co-led by Human Rights Watch and my organization, the International Federation for Human Rights. Today, I have the honor to address the review mechanism and the Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the team. We welcome this dedicated plenary session on the review, and more broadly, the transparent and inclusive approach taken by the review mechanism reflected in the resolution, allowing for a greater engagement from all stakeholders. However, as we move on to the assessment in 2022 of recommendations touching upon key priorities to civil society, we believe that improvements can still be made to ensure our early, meaningful, and genuine engagement through accessible platforms, including civil society representative and human rights defender from situation countries. As you most certainly know, the latter can provide unique and invaluable perspectives, have worked directly with victims and affected communities for many years, and have experienced firsthand the ICC's work, including the effects of shortcomings in the court's performance. The CICC review team and its members have identified several key priorities, reflecting areas of long-standing interest and concern, many of which are slotted for assessment next year. These include gender equality and the need of safe, respectful, and effective workplace conduct, the guarantee of the highest standards of fair trial and completion of the legal aid policy, states party cooperation with the court, particularly in the face of politicized attack, merit-based nominations and elections of highly qualified court officials, improved and strengthened methodologies of the Office of the Prosecutor, adequate and sufficient resources to carry out the court's mandate consistent with its workload, as well as all the recommendations aiming at placing victims and affected communities at the heart of ICC proceedings and at ensuring the respect of their rights, including early and direct engagement with these victims and affected communities, better outreach and public information strategies, increased field presence, and meaningful participation, including through chosen and effective representation during all stages of the proceedings. We would also like to remind that while states parties play an important role to encourage, support, and ensure changes at the ICC, it is imperative that the court, acting in compliance with the Rome Statute, remains the ultimate decision maker on issues under its purview that go to the heart of its judicial and prosecutorial independence, as raised today by several state parties. The CICC and the review team and its members stand ready to continue our engagement in the process and offer our assistance to the Assembly and to the Court to ensure genuine engagement by our members in this critical process. We are looking forward to upcoming opportunities to meaningfully discuss the recommendations and to all together engage on the strategic vision for the Court for the next 10 years, as suggested in Recommendation 363. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you, Ms. Lanta, and the Coalition for the ICC for your words and for your commitment to the process. Now we're going to look to a video statement again by Human Rights Watch, Madam Esti Tambay.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to the plenary on the review process of the ICC on behalf of Human Rights Watch. We welcome the commitment of states parties to carry out successfully this review process. The court remains indispensable. We appreciate the assistance of many states during this process and the need to respect the court's independence. States parties should continue to recall this very important principle and ensure the necessary guarantees of this during the discussions at the Assembly. This should also advise us to take a cautious approach to the role of the ASP. We would call on states parties to concentrate on the recommendations of the experts for those recommendations that concern the functions of the ASP, and in particular those linked with cooperation, which are the main responsibility of states parties. We welcome the stress on transparency in the review mechanism. We would like the court to consult more broadly the civil society in all of the recommendations that are under its purview. Civil society has a real experience with the way in which the court works in the field. And lastly, we would call that we pay attention to recommendation 363 that calls on all stakeholders to come up with a vision for the court over the coming decade in order to reach an agreement on the amount of activity managed by the court and the resources required therefore. We would call for such a conference to address this on the 25th anniversary of the entry into force so that the ICC can play a more effective role in international justice. We will start working with focal points in order to spread the word about this future conference. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Human Rights Watch.
That exhausts our speaker list, not the speakers, because we already have one delegation that want to say something. But before I give the floor, it's Uganda. Before I give the floor to Uganda, I say we've heard now 13 statements, and the floor is now open for everyone who wants to have a further comment or a question or react to another speaker. You know how the system works. You just push a button. People who are following this debate from far away, perhaps they can send, if they want, a comment or a question to the mail address, which was mentioned, I think, in the note preceding this meeting. So on that note, I'll give the floor to the delegation of Uganda. You have the floor, sir or madam. I don't know who's going to speak. It's a sir. Sorry, you have the floor.
Yeah, the last time I checked. Madam President, first I would like to align myself with the statement of Ivory Coast on behalf of the African group. rather the statement of Ivory Coast on behalf of the African group of states parties. I would like to commend you and your co-facilitator, Ambassador Kanu, on the way you have achieved progress thus far. My delegation would like to see as part of the reform process the requirement that staff recruitment should be reserved for professionals from states parties. For avoidance of all doubt, no staff recruitment should be open to job seekers from non-states parties. And I say job seekers from a well-positioned vantage point. If we have job holders from non-states parties, they do not share the passion or the views that are held by states parties. My delegation would also like to advise that part of the review process should provide that all elections should be held at the United Nations headquarters in New York, where there is full representation of all states parties. This, we believe, would further strengthen the court in its mandate to end impunity for the perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Nothing beats full participation when it comes to populating the positions, whether in the elective capacity, like judges and prosecutors and deputy prosecutors, but also the recruitment of people who service those positions in their various capacities, because they have a lot of influence on the office holders that they service. I thank you.
I thank the delegate of Uganda for his statement and his questions. I'm looking around if there are more. I see the hands of Germany raised. Yeah, if I don't want to anyone to break jump any queue, but I think Germany is at the moment the one asking for. So, bitte Jan, das Wort. You have the floor. You have to push the button, yeah? That's.
Jetzt. Hartelijk dank, meneer de chair, and thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I will be very brief. I just wanted to add to the audience that Germany from day one has been very actively involved and interested in the review process. We attach great importance to this process and trust that it will make the court even more effective and efficient as it is today. As my French colleague Hélène had mentioned a moment ago, the UK, France and Germany had sent a document to the review mechanism with points that we believe are very important, and certainly I want to repeat those. And I'd like to conclude by thanking you, Ambassador, and Ambassador Kanu, and your very able co-focal points for the tremendous and sometimes very not really thankful work with providing matrices and very many documents. So this is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Danke. Thank you. I'm looking around. Is there anyone else who would, by pushing the button preferably, but I think we have exhausted. There were many statements. They contained many elements. We heard some questions. So we're going to conclude this debate by first asking our president to respond. Maybe she is in a position that she can already respond to one or two questions, but at least her impressions of the debate. So, Madam President, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. distinguished representatives, and indeed, I am indeed grateful for the opportunity that I have had to participate in this plenary discussion on the review mechanism, which is significant on so many fronts. As I said at the beginning of this plenary, this is indeed a top priority for us. And as you said, Ambassador, it is indeed a subject that it is very close and dear to me personally. And I thank the review mechanism for having had the insight to hold this plenary session open to all stakeholders, and it has been the exercise throughout this year. And thank you for encouraging an interactive dialogue. I would like to once more underline the crucial importance of this exercise and the importance of concluding this exercise in a timely manner. We need to ensure that we complete the assessment and of the recommendations, and that we also engage in an active follow-up and implementation of this assessment. The implementation is key. Many of you have referred to the importance of implementation, and indeed I see that we are well on the way towards implementation, which will be indeed the next step, thanks to the roadmap set out by the review mechanism in the comprehensive action plan. Now, I have to say that there is no doubt that the review is an ambitious exercise. And I recognize, as many of you have, that this imposes quite a burden. That is on state parties, in particular the ASP mandate holders, but as well as on the court, taking into account the short timelines of Resolution 7 and the request for reports and discussions. Nevertheless, I would like to stress that it is indeed important for us to keep the momentum in order to achieve the goals of the review of the court and the system in a timely manner. As you said, Ambassador van den Eyssel, the timetable is indeed ambitious, but we need to stick to it. Now, many of you have highlighted today that the review gives us a unique opportunity to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system. This is the goal of the exercise. So let us seize this momentum at this juncture in the life of the court. We are two decades after the entry into force of the treaty, and in 2023, we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. So this is indeed a crucial moment and a very good moment to embark in this reflection. And I have taken due note of the opportunity to reflect, and you have mentioned this, some of you, on that also this gives us an opportunity to reflect on our vision for the system for the next 10 years. This is important. This is something that we indeed need to consider at the Bureau and the Presidency, but I have taken due note of what you have said in this regard. I would also like to say that in order to succeed in this review exercise, we, all stakeholders, need to approach the exercise in a constructive manner. While we may not all agree on each and every recommendation, we all need to engage with each other in a constructive way and without distrust. All of us, state parties, the court, and civil society, have a stake in this exercise. We are all responsible for improving the system, and we cannot fail in this important task. This is simply not an option. This exercise is not only about the work of the court. It is about our own work and our own responsibilities at the Assembly. This project is indeed about a holistic review of the Rome Statute system as a whole. So let us seize the opportunity to strengthen the court and to make it a stronger and improved judicial institution in a strengthened system. In closing, let me once again thank you all the members of the review mechanism and the court focal points for their extraordinary efforts in ensuring a constructive and transparent dialogue among all. I wish you every success as you continue to lead us in this extremely important exercise. We share all this goal together. Thank you very much for your attention and for those important contributions to the debate.
I thank you very much, Madam President. We are about to conclude. According to the script, we got the review mechanism as the final word. So, Michael, please.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ambassador van der Ijssel. Thank you, Madam President, for your very kind words, inspiring words, and also for state parties. I'll just go to the closing because of the time, but to note that we think that the question from Finland is very important on behalf of the Nordic group. And I think we've all said the words which we need to say, including from the Madam President. Let us collaborate, let us be a bit more trusting, let us devote some time to the review process since it is an ambitious process. So on behalf of the review mechanism, we thank you all for your active participation in today's meeting. We are really appreciative of your direct interaction with us and with the court focal point. This has given us a deeper appreciation of where the different stakeholders stand in relation to the work of the review process. And we wish to assure you that we will very much keep in mind what you have expressed today and the messages that we've received as we move forward with our mandate in the coming year. Thank you, this concludes the work for this plenary. We will give the floor back to Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for this segment of our plenary today. And before we resume the general debate that some representatives are still pending of giving us their remarks, and I will invite Vice President Sequencova to chair on that part of the debate. But before we go into this segment, I would like to return to another item that it is in fact closely related to the review mechanism and the efforts to strengthen the court. I would like to refer to the election of non-candidates of the Advisory Committee on Nominations. As you may remember, on our first day, we deferred the election for this body because we needed to continue conversations in order to find consensus in accordance with the relevant rules. I have to say, unfortunately, despite all efforts, we have not yet reached consensus regarding all 9 candidates. Discussions continue, conversations continue regarding one of the 9 candidates. So I would like to take this opportunity to inform you all of what is going on at this moment with relation to this item of the agenda, but also I would like to take this opportunity to really urge the states involved in this conversation to approach this matter in a constructive and flexible manner, taking into account the importance of the Advisory Committee on Nominations, indeed to strengthen the Rome Statute system. The ICN is indeed an extremely important aspect, an important component in the life of this court. The experts, the independent experts have made a recommendation in this regard, more specifically recommendation 380, which will allow us to discuss and decide collectively on what are the required conditions or requirements of each one of the candidates. So I hope that we can find a solution in order to proceed to this election this week. I hope to be able to invite you to return to this item tomorrow. I trust that with the assistance of you all, we will be able to find a necessary consensus to proceed to elect these 9 candidates this week, hopefully tomorrow. I thank you very much for your attention, and now we will revert to the general debate. We will adjourn for a few minutes, and then we will proceed with the general debate.
Distinguished representatives, we will now proceed with continuation of the agenda item 8, general debate, and we will continue with the remaining statements. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker, Her Excellency Mrs. José Mutombo Kise, Minister of State, Minister of Justice and Garde des Sceaux of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please. This is the English interpreter. We have no input. Mr. Prosecutor, Mr. Registrar, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of civil society. It's an honor for me to be able to stand here before you, before the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute, representing my country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. The International Criminal Court is the standard bearer of justice and peace. We see that it has a key role in ensuring the end of impunity for perpetrators of mass crimes. The DRC fully adheres to the noble objectives of the court and offers its unwavering support thereto. It was, in fact, the very first country to refer to the court the situation in our own country. It is currently not seized of any case from my country. We are fully committed to supporting the court's work. The very first investigation of the court took place on our territory, and the very first cases that were judged and put to trial in this court were from my country, nationals accused of crimes against humanity and war crimes. We feel also that my country has also done its utmost to bring to justice the perpetrators of such crimes on its own territory wherever possible, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is done in direct application of the Rome Statute, as is permitted by the Constitution of the DRC, and I think stands to attest as a very good example of complementarity between the international criminal justice system and national legislation. Our dedication to justice is real and tangible, as is always the case. We stand for the rights of the Congolese people so as to never fall back into the void that existed before the creation of the International Criminal Court. We will be developing our national focal point, and in this way would be even better placed to cooperate further with the court and ensure redress for victims and communities. In this new chapter of the ICC, the DRC warmly welcomes the new prosecutor and congratulates him on his election, and we welcome the new investigations underway by the court. We also want to congratulate the TFV on all the work that it has done in offering indemnities to victims, particularly those in the DRC. Our commitment to international criminal justice is unwavering, and it will ensure that there is justice against those who would commit such heinous crimes, and at the same time offer recognition and assistance to the victims thereof. It is a justice that is applied to the strong and to the weak. In the bloody history through which we have trudged, remember that the judgments and sentences of the court will fall on you, be you black or white, strong or weak. Certain aspects of the investigations have had to be discounted because of the shortage of resources. We feel that and the DRC feels that resources should never be justification for dropping such investigations. In defense of the court and in order to strengthen it, it is up to all member states and states parties to the Rome Statute to do their utmost. As concerns the recommendations of the IER, we feel that this can only enhance the court's operations. The court needs to work in a healthy and non-conflictual environment. The DRC also calls for greater swiftness when it comes to the trials. It is worth remembering that the very first case, which was a Congolese case, the Lubanga case, is still not complete. And we have only just set up the collective reparations order program, but those concerned have not yet received their dues, and the colonel involved is already free. Also, Dr. Mukwege, Nobel Peace Prize winner, is dedicated to repairing the damaged women's bodies who were victims of sexual crimes. And he stated that even a surgeon can not become accustomed to seeing what I see. It's important for us to continue doing what we can to support the victims. This is because repairing injured bodies is one aspect, but how do we repair their minds? It's up to us to do our utmost to reconsolidate peace. How can you restore peace without a truth? There will be no peace without justice. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your statement. We will now continue with the remaining statements by the non-governmental organizations. I give the floor to Ms. Gizu Jahangari from International Federation for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Excellencies, it is my pleasure to address you as Vice President of the International Federation for Human Rights, FIDH, 192 NGOs from 117 countries, including my organization, Open Asia Arman Shah, working in Afghanistan. I'm a feminist, and over the past 29 years have been working for Afghanistan, where permanent war takes a massive toll on its population. We have conducted work related to the ICC mandate, reaching out to victims, in particular women, often at great risk. Last year, a colleague was killed one day after a meeting in our office. This August of withdrawal of the US troops, we had to evacuate staff, many of them still in the country. We have lost the capacity of people working to strengthen accountability for international crimes. We had to destroy all documents. We have lost the work of a lifetime. During this, the ICC has remained largely absent. We welcome the OTP's opening of the investigation in Afghanistan, but are concerned that the prosecutor narrowed the investigation, excluding some alleged perpetrators. In the words of the pretrial chamber, a proper investigation should focus first on crimes and then on identifying who the responsible persons of those crimes are. Accountability for international crimes in Afghanistan is a missing link. We call on states parties to effectively cooperate with the court and press for solutions to protect critical information before it's too late. FIDH is also concerned about the court's limited financial resources for proper investigations and prosecutions, for outreach to survivors, victims, and affected communities, and to conduct adequate, localized public information about matters that affect their rights. In situations like Afghanistan, where the risks for human rights defenders are high, a dialogue between all stakeholders is crucial. I encourage the ASP to press for the implementation of recommendations by the independent expert review. We need a dialogue beyond mere formalities, genuine consultations that take into account the realities of situation countries. Victims deserve justice.
I thank you for the statements, and now I give the floor to Ms. Garciela Rodriguez on behalf of the Comisión Mexicana de Defensa y Promoción de Derechos Humanos. You have the floor.
Distinguished delegates and members of the International Criminal Court, the Mexican Commission for the Defense and Promotion of Human Rights, along with other civil society organizations, have long submitted communications to the Office of the Prosecutor on the commission of international crimes in Mexico in the context of the so-called war on drugs. Since the armed forces participate in public security operations, the number of these crimes has significantly increased and includes alarming numbers of murders, torture, sexual violence, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearances committed both by state and non-state actors, sometimes acting in collusion. These conducts have been perpetrated in a generalized and systematic manner against civilians, in furtherance of a policy of demonstrating the effectiveness of the war on drugs, which enables the commission of these crimes and lacks the intention to hold perpetrators accountable. The generalized nature of torture and enforced disappearances has been confirmed at an international level. In 2015, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture affirmed that torture and ill treatment occur in Mexico in a generalized manner and in a context of impunity. Last month, the Committee on Enforced Disappearances visited Mexico and regretted to confirm that within an alarming context of 95,121 victims nationwide, a generalized situation of disappearances continues in large parts of the country, revictimization prevails, and impunity is almost absolute. In our most recent communication to the OTP, we, along with the International Federation of Human Rights, provided sufficient elements to prove the existence of crimes against humanity in Mexico between 2006 and 2018 concerning torture perpetrated by elements of the federal forces. This submission documents cases referring to 642 persons torture in Mexico committed in the context of the progressive militarization of the country, making it possible for military elements to take charge of public security. Moreover, the Mexican Commission has also documented the commission of extrajudicial killings and other crimes committed in the context of non-international armed conflicts within Mexican territory in the same period. Thus, we submitted in June a communication to the OTP on the criminal patterns of killings committed by Mexican federal forces, which enjoy complete impunity due to the unwillingness and lack of capacity of the state to investigate or prosecute their members. To date, despite the systematicity of these crimes, we are not aware of any relevant convictions. Given the alarming levels of impunity, we are certain that the Mexican government has long been unwilling or unable to investigate and prosecute perpetrators, especially members of the armed forces. Succinctly put, Crimes against humanity and war crimes are being and have been perpetrated in Mexico, and we believe that the involvement of the ICC would be crucial to elicit an appropriate governmental response to generalized impunity. In this sense, we call on states to ensure the ICC has the necessary resources to move forward with preliminary examinations, especially in situations where, as in the case of Mexico, there is a clear lack of will and capacity on the part of the state to investigate and prosecute those most responsible for committing international crimes.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Ahmed Abouful on behalf of Al-Haq, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to address you today on behalf of the following Palestinian human rights organizations: Al-Haq Organization, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, and Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights. As you are all aware, 6 Palestinian civil society organizations have recently been designated as terrorist organizations by the occupying Israeli authorities. The decision to label our organizations as terrorist is the culmination of years-long orchestrated campaign that aims at silencing human rights defenders. The tactics used include several intimidation and harassment methods, such as smearing campaigns, attempts to try financial resources, targeting with notorious Pegasus spyware, and even death threats. This is primarily because of our long-lasting constructive engagement with the ICC. Former prosecutor Bensouda acknowledged in her 2016 report on primary examination the following, and I quote, "State members of certain organizations that have gathered information of relevance to the Office of the Prosecutor's primary examination, such as Al-Haq and Al-Mizan, have been subjected to threats and other apparent acts of intimidation and interference." End of quote. Israel systematically denies international access to the occupied Palestinian territory, including UN special rapporteurs and fact-finding missions and commission of inquiries. As a result, the only access the international community and the relevant investigative bodies, including the ICC, have to the requisite documentation of the international crimes allegedly committed in the situation in Palestine is through our organizations. Israel's targeting of our organizations aspires to hinder the work of the ICC by depriving it of one of its main sources of information, evidence, and supporting analysis. Our organizations have been submitting vital communications to the Office of the Prosecutor. Our organizations have also played a pivotal role in advocating for the State of Palestine's accession to the Rome Statute. Excellencies, the Apartheid Convention lists persecution of organizations and persons by depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms because they oppose apartheid as one of the inhumane acts of apartheid. Israel's unsubstantiated designations are a clear attempt by an apartheid regime to conceal its crimes and to prevent the ICC from acquiring information and evidence that have been collected by our organizations. Such acts of tampering with or interfering with the collection of evidence when at trial stage, for example, amount to offenses against the administration of justice, as stipulated by the rules of the Rome Statute. We therefore urge the Office of the Prosecutor to expedite its investigation in the situation in Palestine, including the evident crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. In addition, the Assembly of State Party has a unique responsibility to address this matter. State parties must swiftly and decisively protect human rights defenders in Palestine. This Assembly and its state parties must boldly and unequivocally condemn Israel's designations. The bizarre silence of this Assembly and its state parties in this situation sends a very unfavorable message to other civil society organizations working actively on the ground, especially in situations to which the ICC have no access. Excellencies, if colonial occupying powers will be allowed to interfere, influence, and even outlaw human rights organizations, then we can only envisage a very dystopian future ahead of the human rights movement as a whole, in which victims will be abandoned, impunity will prevail, and justice will be denied, and the ICC itself may be rendered irrelevant. Together, we must make it the purpose of our lives to prevent such an outcome. Excellencies, Palestinian victims have placed their hopes and trust in us to make their voices heard, and we will stay the course, undeterred. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
I thank you for your statement, and now I give the floor to Mr. Serge Gabou-Kilo on behalf of the Ligue pour la paix, les droits de l'homme et la justice. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues and friends, I am Nadia Volkova from Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, and I am deeply honored to make this address today on behalf of Ukrainian NGOs, Crimean Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hounds, Dear Human Rights Center, Human Rights Centers MENA, and Ukraine.
Clearly, we got the wrong video, so just please bear with me for a second.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice, LIPADOJ, a member of the Coalition for the ICC, has been accompanying the ICC in its objective of a fair and effective court in the fight against impunity since 2006. It is especially interested in the situation of the victims and affected communities with whom it lives and understands better. This allows it to be always very attentive and watchful on all the issues that affect the rights of victims and affected communities. It is in this context that in our observation addressed to the ICC, pursuant to the Chamber's July 16, 2006 order, under Rule 103 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the issue of reparation has taken pride of place. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at present, the reparation in the Republic Democratic of Congo, the country of the first ICC cases, suffer from a lack of sufficient staff to serve the fund for the benefit of victims. The lack of resources that meet the expectation of victims and affected communities, and the lack of sufficient number of fund partners to implement the reparation project and assistance program. This situation significantly diminished the trust of victims and affected community in the work of the ICC, so that out of desperation, they join the camp of violence. In addition, there is the ever-increasing insecurity with a long list of new victims of international crime, as if the ICC has never intervened in this part of the country, especially in Ituri and North Kivu. These challenges are the result of serious problems with the operating resources allocated to the ICC, which do not keep up with its ever-increasing responsibilities. Thus, for a better visibility and especially for more efficiency and credibility to the ICC's action for the benefit of victims and affected communities, we invite the Assembly and all its state parties to strengthen its support to the ICC in these first experiences of reparation in the Democratic Republic of Congo by providing sufficient means to support the fund in its program. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the statement on behalf of the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice, made by Dr. Serge Ngabukino, the Director of Legal Affairs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now I give the floor to Mr. David Donat-Katin from the Parliamentarians for Global Actions. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Deputy President, representatives of the Court, distinguished representatives of states and non-governmental organizations, Madam Minister of Justice of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, dear friends and colleagues. It is an enormous privilege and honor for Parliamentarians for Global Action, the largest organization of individual lawmakers from over 130 countries and 1,100 members in all regions of the world, to address these 20 Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute of the ICC. The Rome Statute is a treaty that our organization started to promote as an idea in 1989 to mark a new era after the Cold War that should have been characterized by the globalization of justice, human rights, and the rule of law. PGA today renews its absolute commitment to the object and purpose of the Rome Statute, namely to put an end to impunity for the most serious crimes. In particular, PGA undertakes to continue to carry out concrete action for the universality of the Rome Statute, and yesterday we heard the testimonies of 3 parliamentarians from Malaysia, Ukraine, and Jamaica addressing a side event that we organize towards ratification. The effective implementation of the principle of complementarity, the effective application of the obligation of cooperation, and the protection of integrity of the Rome Statute, including protection of the independence and impartiality of the court principals organs. In this respect, PGA supports a reform of the procedures for the nomination of ICC judicial candidates at the national level, in line with the recommendations contained in Chapter 20 of the Independent Expert Review Report. PGA notes with great concern paragraph 29 of the ASP report on the election of the judges, which postpones relevant action by this ASP to 2022. Therefore, we believe that it is in the best interest for the ICC and state parties to agree next year on binding criteria for a uniform procedure at the national level to ensure that the best possible nominees are emerging and that the current practice of politically nominated candidates be altered. While the national laws of most state parties allows for the political appointment of certain judges to the highest judicial institutions, the Rome Statute does not preclude that states create transparent, public and merit-based procedures to select the most qualified judicial candidates as nominees. This is a necessary reform that the ASP is called to undertake by the end of next year. Since the first ASP in 2002, PGA has consistently recognized the need to support for the ICC as a centerpiece of the Rome Statute system against impunity. In this respect, budgetary needs must be met as the court increases the effectiveness and efficiencies in delivering more cases in the situations falling under the court jurisdiction. Therefore, the budget of the ICC must be driven by the imperative to address atrocity crimes waves and must adapt to the needs. States shall never use the limitations to the budget as a tool to control or curb the court activities. The Rome Statute creates a criminal court which applies international law under Article 21 of the statute and functions within the shell of an international organization. But while the budgetary needs of an international organization are predictable and relatively modest, the budgetary needs of a criminal jurisdiction, which is also created by the Rome Statute, are not entirely predictable and may be rather significant, even if incomparably smaller of the budgetary resources absorbed by the security sectors or other areas in our societies. The ICC budget process must be reformed to reflect this reality, so to upgrade the ICC and align it with the needs of the fight against impunity worldwide. A final point that I would like to make today is that we believe that it's very important to learn the lessons from the failures of domestic and international criminal justice in concrete situations. For example, how is it possible, we ask, and our members are asking, that no case on crimes against humanity allegedly occurred in Afghanistan was initiated before any Afghan court or before the ICC, since the Rome Statute was ratified by Afghanistan in February 2003? Impunity in Afghanistan led to new atrocity crimes, and now the Taliban are back in power. They are the de facto regime ruling over Afghanistan. The international community failed to ensure the respect of international law, including international criminal law, in 20 years of intense intervention in Afghan territory. Counter-terrorism prevailed over the need to bring to justice those responsible of crimes against humanity and other crimes under international law, including leaders of the Taliban and certain leaders, also known as the warlords, of the Afghan state, whose subordinates refused to fight when they had to defend their country in the recent war and following the Doha peace agreements, which were repeatedly breached by the Taliban. PGA calls upon the ICC and its Assembly of State Parties, which includes Afghanistan, to engage in a lesson-learned exercise concerning interferences and external pressures that might have hampered the respect of the Rome Statute concerning the Afghanistan situation, with the view to take measures that would impede the repetition of the same mistakes or failures in the future in other situations falling under the court jurisdiction. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
I thank you very much for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Nadia Volkova, Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, Crimea Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hound, Daya Human Rights Center, and Human Rights Center Zmina. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues and friends, I am Nadia Volkova from Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, and I am deeply honored to make this address today on behalf of Ukrainian NGOs, Crimean Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hounds, Dear Human Rights Center, Human Rights Center Zmina, and Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, for whom justice and accountability for grave crimes have been at the forefront of their movement ever since the Revolution of Dignity took place in 2013, followed by the breakout of armed conflict in Crimea and armed hostilities in eastern Ukraine in 2014, which are still ongoing. Following the decision of the then prosecutor of the ICC, Fatou Bensouda, to conclude the preliminary examination in the situation of Ukraine as statutory criteria for opening of investigation had been met, due to the number of factors, including existing budgetary constraints, the submitting of the request for authorization for opening of investigation had been postponed until further notice and left to be made by the recently elected prosecutor Karim Khan. The decision was confusing to many, but most of all to the victims, civil society and domestic authorities, because the existing challenges are too great for the domestic system alone, and without the catalytic effect of the ICC investigation, there is a risk that international justice will be further deprioritized. While we are mindful of the existing challenges faced by the court, it is imperative that the office continues to actively engage with all the stakeholders and to put pressure on them in order to ensure that principle of complementarity is unequivocally adhered to by the state of Ukraine, bearing in mind that any further delays in opening of the investigation will further challenge the ICC's ability to fulfill its mandate in relation to Ukraine and will add to further disillusionment in its effectiveness. Excellencies, Ukraine has homework which it has consistently failed to do for many years now, to ratify and implement the Rome Statute, and not for the lack of active campaigning on the part of victims and civil society in all the possible fora. While Ukraine fails to factor in justice and accountability as an effective deterrent to further escalation and spread of the ongoing war, it is very dependent on the support of the international community in tackling consequences of armed conflict. Therefore, we call on the international community to make a consistent and consolidated effort to put pressure on Ukraine's officials, in particular the President of Ukraine, to sign Draft IHL Implementation Bill 2689, to initiate the ratification of the Rome Statute process, and to conclude the Memorandum of Understanding between Ukraine and the ICC as soon as possible. We, in turn, would like to reassure you of our commitment and continued cooperation in promoting peace, justice, and ending of impunity. We thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Cathy Olivia van Tergo on behalf of the Stop Ecocide Foundation. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Madam Chair, Stop Ecocide Foundation would like to begin by acknowledging the dedicated work of all those involved in the review and reforms taking place at the court. We trust and believe that the court will emerge stronger from this important internal process. Ladies and gentlemen, the court's remit is to deal with crimes which most threaten the peace, security, and well-being of the world. Our global community faces twin threats at this time, threats that can call for urgent action. They are interlinked threats of climate change and biodiversity loss, at levels so serious that the recent IPCC report describes changes already set in motion, such as sea level rise, will be irreversible in the coming centuries. The report also noted that the internationally agreed threshold of global heating, 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, is dangerously close. But these are not naturally occurring threats or changes. They share a key root cause in the mass damage and destruction of ecosystems, now increasingly being named for the crime it is, the crime of ecocide. 2 years ago, at the 18th session of the Assembly of State Parties, two of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, Vanuatu and the Maldives, had the courage to call for the serious consideration of including this crime under the Rome Statute. At last year's ASP, Belgium concurred, declaring, and I quote, "It would be useful to examine the possibility of introducing crimes known as ecocide into the Rome Statute system." Ladies and gentlemen, in direct response to growing diplomatic and political interest, our foundation last year convened an independent expert panel of 12 renowned international criminal and environmental lawyers from around the world. Their remit was to draft a clear and robust legal definition of ecocide as a fifth international crime. The expert panel reached consensus in June this year. The resulting text is concise, balanced, and strongly based on precedent. It may, we trust, serve as a useful draft for state parties of this Assembly to consider. The core text is this, and I quote, "Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts." The text has been well received in the political world. Parliamentary or government-level discussion to criminalize ecocide is now on public record in at least 17 of the ICC state parties. Just last week, the Belgian Parliament passed a resolution by an overwhelming majority calling on its government to propose recognition of ecocide here at the ICC. There is a broad and significant civil society support for recognizing this crime internationally. From the Global Citizens Assembly to faith leaders, Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomeus, from the Indigenous Alliance of Mother Nature's Guardians to the youth movement, Fridays for Future, it is an explicit demand. A recent statement from the International Corporate Governance Network, an investor-led group of firms managing over $59 trillion in global assets, specifically called on governments to collaborate internationally to criminalize ecocide. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we respectfully suggest to the Assembly that it is time to address the criminal threat to the future of human civilization in all seriousness. We invite you to support the call of a world under threat and to stand in solidarity with future generations and with each other. We invite you to amend the Rome Statute to include a crime of ecocide. Thank you.
I thank you very much for your statement. Now, this was the last speaker on my list. I would like to therefore thank all the speakers for their statements presented during the general debate agenda item. And unless there are any requests for the floor, this agenda item is closed and the meeting is adjourned. I thank you very much for your participation.